a pledge to push China to open itself up to American businesses as the U.S. president lands in Beijing. Donald Trump bringing with him a delegation of top executives, including Apple chief Tim Cook, Tesla's Elon Musk, and a new addition, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang, picked up by an Air Force One in Alaska en route to China. It's the first visit by a U.S. president in nearly a decade amid geopolitical uncertainties and trade tensions. Ahead of that summit, top American and Chinese trade officials met in South Korea to smoothen tariff tensions and expand cooperation. The exchanges mark the seventh round of talks between U.S. Trade Representative Scott Bassett and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng since Mr. Trump's return to office last year. Washington and Beijing agreed to a year-long trade truce in October after a tit-for-tat tariff war that saw both sides hiking levies on each other's goods to more than 100%. Our correspondent on both sides of the Pacific have been tracking developments. CNA's Si Hui is joining us live outside the hotel President Trump will be staying in Beijing, while Nick Harper standing by in Washington, D.C. We start with you, Si Hui. How has China prepared for this summit? What is Beijing looking to get out of it?
Well, you can't see, but there's a huge swath of people surrounding me, curious onlookers, as well as media personnel like myself, reporters, cameramen. Security is extremely tight. You can see there are barriers being put up to cordon us out and away from the roads. And very soon you'll likely see that the road will be closed off. In fact, it might slowly be being closed off, especially since we know that Mr. Trump has just landed at Beijing Capital International Airport. And so there is a huge excitement, anticipation, as it will probably take about 20 to 30 minutes for him to arrive at the Four Seasons Hotel where he's likely to put up for the Trump-Xi summit. Now, negotiations, the real negotiations are already underway. You mentioned earlier, candid, in-depth talks at South Korea. Just from that, they were saying that there will be on the agenda at Trump-Xi summit, they will look to resolve economic issues as well as expand practical cooperation. So lots are on the table at the Trump-Xi summit: the Iran war, trade tariffs, tech, as well as possibly the Taiwan issue.
Now, Nick, let's bring you in. The Nvidia CEO is a last-minute addition to Mr. Trump's business entourage. How are they planning to help with Trump's push to open up China?
Yeah, Paul, quite a huge business entourage that Donald Trump is bringing with him. I think we're now up to 17 CEOs from some of the biggest US companies, all coming along to China really to try and sweeten the deal and to try and lure more investment from China to the United States. Some of those coming are Tim Cook of Apple, Elon Musk of Tesla. We've got BlackRock's CEO, Boeing's CEO, and Meta's CEO. And as you mentioned, Jensen Huang also being added as a late addition. Now, in terms of some of the deals that we could see, there is a possibility that China could be buying about 500 Boeing aeroplanes. We've already seen the likes of Apple and Tesla doing well in recent months in China. For example, Apple's seen sales up 20% in the first quarter, while Tesla has been producing far more vehicles at its Shanghai factory. But when it comes to Nvidia, it really is all about those AI chips that many governments around the world really want to get their hands on, including China. Those advanced chips that up until now the US has been somewhat worried about giving to China because of national security concerns. Last year, Donald Trump approved sending some older generation chips from Nvidia to China in the hope that he would get a cut of some of those sales. But the Chinese government hasn't so far approved purchasing those. But with him along for the ride, I think undoubtedly it shows how important the AI boom is when it comes to discussions between the US and China.
Now you're seeing live pictures that's coming out from the Beijing Capital International Airport, where we are waiting for Donald Trump to disembark from Air Force One. As you can see, a huge entourage will follow him, and he's given a warm welcome with the beast just waiting to whisk him away to the airport, as what Si Hui mentioned earlier. And Si Hui, let's go back to you. And on the subject of AI, China has pushed back against proposed U.S. legislation that may curb its chip makers in the global AI race. How concerned is Beijing as it seeks to advance its own AI ambitions? Well, let's go to Nick now.
Okay, now I can hear.
Si Hui, as I was asking about AI, China had pushed back against proposed U.S. legislation that may curb its chipmakers in the global AI race. How concerned is Beijing?
Well, China is concerned about the AI race, but it is not panicked as it can compete at scale when it comes to data volume, when it comes to engineering talent. What it's concerned about is being able to compete at the very cutting edge and whether it can close up the gap between the US and China. And that's why at this summit, it is likely that China is going to call on the need to ease export restrictions, especially on advanced semiconductors as well as AI chips. And so we can see China coming into this summit with growing confidence, especially over the last few weeks. We saw that it had enacted new regulations on a anti-sanctions law, which is going to counter foreign measures that target Chinese companies. And so analysts are saying that this shows the growing confidence, not just in the AI sector, but also financial sector. And we also saw that during that tariff war where we saw China being able to retaliate using its rare earths. And so China is coming into this summit with a really big leverage over US at this point.
Now, Nick, let's go back to you. Rare earths, another sticking point. What could we expect from discussions on this?
Yeah, undoubtedly, rare earths is one of those leverages we've just been hearing about, because those rare earths that the United States needs, but China has been somewhat less able to pass on, has been very disruptive for the United States when it comes to the automotive sectors, the aerospace sector as well. They need those rare earths. What we could see is perhaps a bit of quid pro quo. China might release some of those rare earths. In return, the United States might release some of those superpowered AI chips, because both has the thing that the other one needs. Donald Trump just arriving now at the airport. We're seeing pictures of him arriving, getting off the plane for this very high-profile visit. Much will be needed during the course of the next 36 hours. Donald Trump undoubtedly will want to come away with a win. But when it comes to those rare earths, what we have seen the US do in recent months, since Donald Trump returned to the White House, is aiming to decouple from China and that reliance over China's rare earths. The US has been doing plenty of deals with other countries like Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, many countries that can provide rare earth materials to the United States, which means that they can get those materials without having to rely on China. So a push for self-sufficiency by the United States and trying to reduce that reliance on China. But undoubtedly, the US will want to be able to get their hands on more rare earths, and we may see a continuation of that pause on export controls during the course of this visit.
Well, we're getting live pictures from Beijing, as you can see, of US President Donald Trump, who has landed at Beijing Capital International Airport ahead of the highly anticipated talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, prominent US executives from big tech and Wall Street joining him on this trip, and talks will be centered around Iran, trade, and artificial intelligence. Now, it's Mr. Trump's first visit to China since 2017, originally expected earlier this year. The meeting was delayed by the war on Iran. And as you can see, he has just been welcomed by the Chinese officials, and he's just watching the performance that's been put by him in front of him. Well, he is set to have high talks with Chinese officials and President Xi tomorrow, as we mentioned. He comes at a time when trade tensions expected to dominate the discussions. Technology, rivalry, semiconductor competition also key focus. And he's pushing, as mentioned earlier, that for greater access to US companies in China. He's the first sitting president to visit China for a decade. Last was President Obama back in 2014.
Hey guys, just checking that I am clear. I think I am, but just double check.
Once again, if you're just joining us, you're looking at live pictures that's coming from the Beijing Capital International Airport, where President Donald Trump has just arrived to a fanfare for his summit with President Xi Jinping, which will begin tomorrow. He's accompanied by a delegation of top executives, including Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang, who was picked up in Alaska en route to China. And President Donald Trump has been accompanied by one of his sons as well, as we saw earlier. And the Secretary of State as well, Marco Rubio, we saw earlier, accompanying him as he disembarked from Air Force One. You're looking at live pictures that's coming from the Beijing Capital International Airport, where President Donald Trump has just arrived ahead of a highly anticipated talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, accompanying him, prominent U.S. executives from big tech and Wall Street joining him on this trip. Now, the highly anticipated talks will center around Iran, trade, and artificial intelligence. It's Mr. Trump's first visit to China since 2017. Now, this meeting was originally expected earlier this year, but the meeting was delayed by the war on Iran. And you saw earlier Donald Trump accompanied by his officials, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, along with Donald Trump's family member, one of his sons, accompanying him in this trip.